So it's that time of the year again when top water is the thing to do if you're bass fishing, pike fishing. Usually this is time that I like to throw all kinds of different top waters. And for the longest time, I thought that the only top water really was like a popper. And I had a lot of good success on that, don't get me wrong. But it wasn't until I really understood the differences between the different types of topwater baits and when to use them and kind of put them on a spectrum of like the level of commotion I wanted to put out there, depending on what the bass or the pike were vibing with, was really when I started to understand how to use each bait, the type of scenarios I was looking to use it in, the type of species, like what they might be after. So in this video, I'm going to share with you my top baits. Really, they're all topwater, but you can fish them all differently in different situations. There's 6 different baits here, and we're going to go through each of them, why I like them, maybe some techniques of how to fish them, and to maybe help you expand from your topwater arsenal. Now, topwater is great to fish typically when the water is above 60 degrees, typically for smallmouth, largemouth, and pike. Maybe a little bit cooler for pike. For most of you watching this, if you're in North America and you're freshwater, if you're in the southern states, that might be as early as March. If you're more in the middle Midwest states, or maybe even more north, it may be April or May, or even really high up there, maybe June. So it's all about water temperature. Typically right around that 60-degree mark or higher is when I start to notice it. And smallmouth will hit, pike will hit typically a little earlier when it's cooler out, just because they're more cooler species. Once it gets warm out though, we like to fish this typically in low light, so dawn and dusk is typically a great time. Those are kind of those bite windows where the water is at its coolest, and those fish are typically hunting upwards and looking for that. So let's dive in here, and we're going to go through the top 6 baits that I think everyone should at least have one, and kind of know how to use it in the right situations. So I want to start with a story, and this really originates from this past weekend fishing with this guy. And this is the first time I used a lure, not only this type, which is a wake bait, which I'll get into that as one of our first categories, but something this large. This is 7 inches. It's a 3-ounce bait. And I was up and I was trying to fish topwater. There's pike in the area. I know there's bass in the area. But I thought to myself, I'm going to get this huge, gaudy topwater lure, and I'm going to throw it and see what happens. So put it out there. The first cast, it just looked horrendous. It looked like basically like a swimming muskrat. It was low light, about 8:30 in the evening. Second cast, I chuck it out there, and I'm just slowly crawling it back. And before you know it, a giant just takes it down, and I was on for the ride. Ended up being a 4.5-pound largemouth, which is a pretty big largemouth bass for northern states up there, because it's just, they're not feeding like they are as much in the south. But this was the first time that I thought to myself, using big topwaters, while it may limit the overall production in terms of numbers, now that you are going to be targeting large fish. Shortly after that, I caught a fish that was about 3 pounds. And typically, it's 7-inch bait. What I've heard is that a bass will hit something up to 50% of its size. So I'm already going into it knowing I'm going to get something at least 12 to 14 inches. Typically in that area, it's going to be 2-pounder up. So the first one here is a wake bait. Now the wake bait itself, they come in a variety of sizes. I personally use a wake bait. It's very easy to use. You just reel it in. I have a small one that's maybe 3 inches, and then I have a large one. I put the wake bait on. Like I said, I was going after a lunker. I was lunker or bust. So that's what I wanted, the wake bait. Something that I can just move through the water column very slowly. Creates a nice big wide V. It's not very loud. It's really just creating a nice big wide wake zone so that it's drawing things in. So this is something, again, when I'm sizing up like this, I know what I'm getting into. It's probably not going to be a numbers game, but when I get into the bass, this is it. Now, you could also use a smaller version of something like this and have a very similar product where you're using a wake bait when you don't want to create a lot of noise, but you do want to let them know you're there. And maybe that's great for, fish that may be a little more skittish. Maybe they're hunkering down, but you can really call them from the depths with something like this. And obviously you can size it down for your waters. If you're going for smallmouth, A big lunker will definitely eat this. I've had smallmouth eats, you know, 6-7 inch swim baits. They're big smallmouth, but you can always size it down. So I think it's important to have a wake bait in your arsenal like this. This is the Bass Pro XPS, but there's a bunch of different wake baits. You know, Berkeley makes a good one. You know, all kinds of different ones. You don't have to break the bank. This is like 15 bucks. You know, and then obviously maybe a smaller one too, just to have some variety in your box. In terms of colors, I'm a big fan. I like black, I like bone, are kind of my two main colors. You know, I fish a lot of black at dark because you have that silhouette. And then a bone, maybe if you're fishing in lower light, murky water, you can really stand out with that white, because most fish have underbellies that are white. So those kind of my two main colors. And then if you wanted a third, you know, something to match the hatch in terms of your water, so maybe it's a perch or a bluegill, wherever you're at. So the wake bait is the first one, and this isn't in any order. This is just kind of what I'm drawing out of my box. So the second type of lure, and if we can think about this maybe as the continuum of commotion that we want to put on the water. So you kind of have the size of the lure, right? Different sizes, or the wake bait, large and small, or whatever. And then you have the continuum in terms of how much commotion and attention you're trying to draw and how loud you're trying to be. So we have kind of like the wake bait, which is, you know, sizes can vary, but it's kind of towards the end of like low commotion. You're creating a big V. You are creating some disruption on the water, but you're not, you know, there's not a lot of rattle, there's not a lot of big plops, not a lot of big splashes. So maybe that's good for certain situations where maybe they're not super hyper aggressive, but they are kind of actively feeding, and maybe they're, you know, they're shy, or they want to kind of lay low. That might be a good way to start with it. Kind of one step further down now is walking baits. So these are, this is the Super Spook, the Heat-In Spook, two different sizes. This is the bone color, like I said. I do have a black and chrome, and then, you know, just a classic white and red. Two different sizes. Forget, this might be like a 3-inch, this may be like a 5. So I've caught pike on both. I've caught bass, largemouth on both. And I have caught, I just noticed smallmouth typically tend to hit this one more. It's a smaller bait. It's, you know, I get better hookups, but this has 3 trebles. So, you know, these things here, how I would use this, you know, if I want to just kind of see what's out there, it sits on the top of the water, and you keep your rod tip low, and you just kind of rod tip down, and you're reeling your slack in, and it's just, you know, well, I won't do that to get the hooks, but it's just kind of darting back and forth, right? Very subtle. You can just quick chops, you can have big ones and have it go here and make big turns, almost like a glide bait.
Awesome. Oh yeah. Oh wow, little pike. Cool. I lost my shoe too. There you go, little baby pike.
So this is something I feel everyone should at least have one. Now you don't need a variety of sizes. I find it typically largemouth pike, this is a great size for it, right? This is where I'm at. If I want to size down my lures, then I'm going like a smaller popper, which I'll get into next. But I love the 5-inch, the Heat-In Super Spook. Again, all kinds of brands make it. This is one that doesn't break the bank. It's also saltwater friendly. So when I do go saltwater, I bring these around. You know, you get snook, tarpon, anything that hits topwater. This is kind of a great universal all around, but you can't go wrong with a pencil bait or a stick bait, and you just slowly just walk it in, walk the dog back to you, and it just darts and they'll hit it. So in the same level on the continuum in terms of the disruption is something called a buzzbait. And you can see here it has a buzz blade. I have a couple of different sizes. You know, and I notice on the larger ones, sometimes I'll even put a trailer on if I'm really trying to size up and get something to strike. And then all the way down to something small. So in my waters here, I fish a lot of rivers. I noticed that the buzzbait does a really great job for smallmouth. It gets bit, right? The blacks, the chartreuses, I can variety of colors. So I typically, because I'm more smallmouth, I will rock a chartreuse in like a lower light or even like a midday. Now when you throw these, they do not float. The other ones in this category, they will all float. and you just kind of work it. So your biggest thing is when you cast it, you get this thing, it's going to sink, so you get it up to the surface and you keep it moving. It's a constant movement here. You want to get it to where, you know, you're having the blade, so the bigger the blade, the bigger the commotion. Just get that blade turning and keep it on the top. Sometimes I'll buzz this thing back and I'll quick fish it, and other times I'll fish it as slow as I possibly can.
There we go. That was nice. That was a nice one. Yeah, that's a nice size one. I should get my net. Oh, let's get my net, definitely, for sure. Oh, come on. Don't lose a mic. Oh, that's a big one. That is a big smallie. Look at this guy. Whew. I mean, freaking awesome. Awesome, awesome smallie. Right on that buzz bait. Yeah, let's go.
But I'm keeping it moving, and I notice it gets bit. Again, pike, you know, largemouth, smallmouth. The buzz bait, super cheap. Do not need to go crazy with it. The biggest thing is just get a quality hook, and then making sure you get a quality blade there. But it shouldn't cost you more than $5 to $10 to get it, to find something good here. I think these are Northern Tackle. I got them off a Tackle Warehouse, or maybe Bass Pro. And then in terms of the trailers, you can get creative with it. I just have a frog on here, black frog, but really anything, you're just trying to create some disturbance on the top of the water and hopefully get bit up. So before going to the last three, the first ones there, other than maybe the wake bait, because it's really just about chucking it out there and reeling it in, the walking baits and the buzz baits, they're, when I say skill, there's a little bit more level of skill, right? The walking baits, you're keeping that, and you have to be active with it. You can't just sit there and reel. The buzz bait, the skill kind of comes when you have to, you know, get it up. So when I cast it, I lift my rod tip, I kind of quick it reel, get it, because it will sink, and it kind of starts hydroplaning on top of the water. And then at that point, I bring my tip down, and I'm reeling in at a constant pace. So if you're a beginner, that's just something to kind of keep in mind and learn. These other three back half of these baits, right now we're kind of moving up that continuum of disruption. Really, they all float, and you're just working them in a variety of ways, but it's not over complex. So it's great that I'll rig up, you know, for beginners or maybe kids who, you know, maybe don't have a lot of finesse with their fishing, or if I just want to sit there and just, you know, have a good time and let the lure do the work. Everyone's probably seen this. This is a frog. This has a very specific use case. This is what I'll use around anything that looks froggy, right? Swamps, where maybe these other lures with their trebles or single hooks will get hung up in the weeds.
There we go. Keep myself back here. Oh, I lost them.
This is weedless, so lily pads, anything that has, you know, a lot of topwater surface weeds, that's what I'm looking for here. So with this, it comes in a variety of sizes. You can use small, large, but typically, you know, I'm matching the hatchery with green. You can go black, you can go white, but you just want something with a soft body. And then as you see on this guy, it's got the double prong hooks. So, you know, they're coming by, they're there, and all you're doing is you're, you know, popping it like a frog would be on top of the water. It's gonna hit it, you know, and then you're making sure you have a tight line, and then you're just setting that hook and driving these double prongs. And they should be in the top of that mouth because they're kind of coming up from underneath because they were hunt coming up. So this is a great weedless option. So if you want to fish topwater, but you're in an area where you can't throw trebles because you're just pulling weeds a lot, the frog's your go-to. So the fifth one here is a popper. Now this is something I grew up fishing with. This is, you know, it floats. You can do big pops and pauses. You can pop, 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 pop. Some of them have rattles in it. Other ones don't. Typically on the commotion scale, you know, they're above buzzbaits. They're above frogs because not only are you making commotion with them, you're creating some splashes on the top water. They do have, most of them have rattles. So you're letting the fish know you're there, but you're giving them a chance. You're kind of popping, drawing their attention. They're going to come and find it, and they're usually going to hit it on that in between the pops. Now you can fish a variety of sizes, right? Big poppers, I have like huge poppers I'll use for saltwater. But these ones here, you know, classic bass popper, it's about 2 inches. I'll even size down if I'm, you know, if I want to go for panfish or smallmouth. Personally, how I use poppers is I will typically use smaller size poppers, and I will, on my continuum scale of commotion, if I want to create like some commotion but still be, you know, gentle with it, I'll do a small popper, because I feel that it's an inviting commotion on top of the water, but it won't, you know, deter a lot of big fish or small fish who maybe aren't in that mood. So it's kind of a good soft entry into that. And it's also something where, if, you know, I just want to kind of see what things are at, I don't want to scare things out of the area, but I do want to create some commotion, I can use that. So popper, you know, this one you can see here has a little bit of a tail, a little feather tail. I notice this one does a little better with smallmouth on that feather tail, just a little extra on there. But again, can't go wrong with poppers. The biggest thing is you want that concave nose there, and that is where the pop comes from. Every popper is a little different, so just learn how to pop it. You know, you want to create a splash, you can create a big splash, small splash, constant splashes, and that's where you can have variety with your retrieves and really see what's taken that day. All right, so the last but not least is some sort of prop bait. Now, kind of the two main prop baits that I'll use, and I think there's a clear winner in my book, the river to sea, the whopper plopper. This is a bait that just gets bit. Now I do use a couple of different sizes, right? So I have, this is the 110, it's about 3 inches or so. This right here is the 75, they make a 90. You know, that really is just the width of it. They make a 130. So I think for most applications, you know, this 110, I've had largemouth hit it. You know, I gotta match my PB largemouth on the 110 and the black loon.
Oh yeah, here we go. It's a big one. Hell yeah, that's a bass. That is a monster bass. Oh my God. Look at that thing. Oh, let's go. That is a fatty.
I've also caught pike on these. And then, so those are the whopper ploppers, and I'll kind of get into maybe my preference. And then these are the Chopos. This is a Berkeley Chopo. Now these are a little less expensive, and they come in some good colors. So I'll use this a lot. This color code is specifically, you know, the chartreuse blue, kind of like the sexy shad. I use this on smallmouth rivers. It does really well. I do know that whopper poplar also makes a color like this. So if you're looking for smallmouth, that's a side note. Maybe have something like this in your arsenal. I find the bite window there. I can get them like late afternoon on this guy here. But how these work, you know, they float, you cast them out there, you reel it in. You reel it in sometimes as slow as you can and still have the plop, 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 plop. You want to create that little prop called prop baits. Other times I might, you know, burn it, stop it, burn it, stop it. Other times I might keep it here and then give it a twitch of the rod. So it really just depends on, you know, what you're looking for. Most of the strikes that I'll get is just on that constant retrieve, and it's either going to be the very initial part of that retrieve or sometimes that back third. I find the first third and the back third is where I get it, because sometimes they're just trailing it, and they take it. Sometimes they will miss it because it is a moving topwater. The biggest thing you want to do is just continue. A lot of times people, to get a strike, they freak out, they stop, or they want to change what they're doing. You had that fish hit it, doing what you're doing, just continue to go with it. And that's kind of what I recommend. This is a great bait. This is something I will always have tied on when I'm going topwater. Variety of sizes as well, but you can fish it loud. It's a loud bait, but you can fish it real loud, really burning it and cranking it, or you can just keep it nice, steady. So it's kind of like a wake bait, but it has that plop, so it's a little bit louder, and that's kind of how it fits on that. Now, in terms of side note, anecdotally for me, whopper plopper versus like a Berkeley Chapo. This is maybe, you know, I don't know, maybe 10 to 20% more expensive. We're only talking a couple bucks. Now, I've had these lures each. They don't get hung up unless you're casting into trees and stuff. So when I'm on rivers and there's some down structure, I typically will do my chopwoods. If I lose one, you know, it is what it is. These are slightly more expensive. I'd be a little more bummed. I'd probably go chasing for it a little more harder. But I find that the whopper ploppers just, they run true, right? So they get on the water and that thing just starts going, and it's pretty smooth. Sometimes, you know, you gotta fine tune yourself, and you gotta fish the chopos, understand them. You know, you can't. Sometimes you fish them too much and you just start burying it. Sometimes it's not fast enough or slow enough. Whereas these, you can kind of vary your speeds and get along with it nicely. So I like the whopper ploppers, but again, I do have about 4 chopos in my box as well. I do like the color options on the chopos. They have a little bit more there, and the price point makes it where I can experiment with some different colors. So that is what we kind of went through. So again, just to recap here, we went through our 6 baits. We started with the wake bait, kind of about the continuum of commotion being the least. Then we went into the walking stick baits. Then we went into the buzz baits, the frogs, the poppers, and then we went into the, they're called prop baits, but whopper plopper bait, chopos, whatever it is. Now, all of these types of baits, when we're setting the hook, understand it's a moving bait. Most of them have trebles, with the exception of the frog. All right, with the exception of the frog. You don't need to have a huge hook set, because most of the time when you do that, you'll pull it right out of their mouth. Either you pull it out of their mouth, or they're hooked and you'll rip the hooks out, right? Because these are, you know, these are good quality hooks. They'll set themselves. So all you need to do, if you have tight and you see it, is just turn. You know, just turn and keep reeling. And if they miss it, you just keep reeling. They might strike it again, or they hit it and then you just created tension and they've hooked themselves. It's an exposed hook, so you don't need to do a whole lot of crazy stuff. Now, the frog here, you will need to keep it tight and send it on those bass, right, that hit that, because you need, you know, they're here, you need to drive these hooks home. So that is my kind of 2 cents of how you would set the hook here. When I first started them, I always thought I just, you know, set the hook like that. Like I would like a Texas rig or something, maybe like a jig or something, but definitely don't need to be that aggressive with your hook set. Just keep tension on it and just kind of turn the body and hang on for the ride. All right, so there you have it. Those are the 6 topwater lures I feel every freshwater fisherman or fisherwoman should have. You don't need to have, you know, 3 or 4 of each. I think it's important to have, you know, maybe 1 of each, or maybe you know, a couple in that spectrum, cover the spectrum, so you can fish the topwater differently. Obviously, if you have different species you're targeting, right? So smallmouth versus largemouth, you know, obviously the bass, the size might differ based on their mouth there. And then, you know, pike. Now, I will say if you're fishing for pike, which I do for northern pike on topwater, you're going to want to put some sort of leader on. So most of the time with my line, you know, I almost all my rods I fish, you know, 20-pound braid, and then I'll run it to some sort of leader. So if I'm doing like topwater and I know pike are not in the area, maybe on the river systems down here where I'm just looking at smallmouth, I'll really just maybe fish with like a 15 to 20 fluorocarbon or mono leader, right? Maybe 6 to 8 feet. Because I want that it floats. That's more of a float. The mono's a little more, because it floats easier. So I want to kind of keep that lure up. Now, if I'm in an area where there's pike, like when I'm up in Canada or you know, northern states in the U.S., I'm putting on a leader, and I'm typically not steel leader. I like fluorocarbon. I'll typically run like a 50 to 60 pound, just short section. Typically, you know, if my lure is this long, I want it like double that, just to kind of give myself, and I'll just tie that line to line, just to give myself a little bit of a bite guard, if you will. And I like fishing the fluoro versus like a steel leader with a swivel. I just feel the steel leader weighs it down and it kind of pulls the nose down. So I'm not a big fan of steel leaders for that sense. So that's just kind of my 2 cents on my line setup and how to fish these and how to set the hook when you got it. When they're on, just keep pressure on them and keep reeling them in. So I hope you guys found this video helpful. Again, comment below with any questions you have on specific baits that I'm using. But you know, I'm a big fan. You know, Bass Pro has a good selection. Amazon, you know, I like Berkeley. I like Whopper Ploppers. I like, you know, Bass Pro brand. Like their XPS line is great. It's very affordable, good quality products. You can obviously go crazy expensive. You know, you can do that too. But if you're just starting out, or even, you know, just somebody where I've been fishing for almost all of my life, and I still find that I can find good lures in that 5 to 15 range. You don't have to break the bank, and as long as you take care of them and you got your line proper, you'll have them for years. So hope you enjoyed the video.